The story begins with a seemingly unrelated cinematic where Dr. Halsey, the woman responsible for the existence of super soldier Spartans like Green Man, is interrogated about her creations. The agent makes a point of questioning how well-adjusted Spartans are, citing their problems socializing and their sociopathic tendencies, claiming that Master Chief is fundamentally broken and that's why he works better as military hardware than a person. As Halsey doesn't appear in the main story again, one could be forgiven for thinking that this has no bearing on the plot, but...
I'm not coming with you this time.
What?
We'll get to that, won't we? The story actually begins with Best Girl waking up Green Man 4 years after he took a nap because the half-a-ship derelict they're stuck on seems to be under attack. Cortana offhandedly comments that she rewrote the firmware of Green Man's armor, and the devs clearly rewrote some of hers because weirdly uncomfortable hallucinations of her swaying shoulders and close-up shots of her body in Halo 3 were not enough. She looks like this now.
I don't know, guys, it's kind of sus.
Green Man heads off to see what's what, only to be immediately scanned by... something. He QTEs his way through some sections of the ship and gets jumped by angry sword-wielding elites the next because apparently some shit has gone down while we were out and splinters of the Covenant are still aggressive. He heads outside to find that not only is Forward Unto Dawn surrounded by Covenant ships, there's also a metal planet taking up most of the skybox, and that's what's scanning them. After kicking a rocket at the attacking ships, the scanner finally notices Green Man's barcode and the planet opens, sucking everything inside, including him despite his best efforts. Waking up on what appears to be the planet's surface, Green Man is confronted with the fact that Cortana has been in service for 8 years now and AI deteriorate after 7, a kind of degenerative instability where the AI thinks itself to death in a condition called rampancy. This is reflected in Cortana's voice distorting now and then, visual glitches, random clips of Halsey's voice, and later on in one-sided arguments. Cortana presents this as inevitable, but Green Man's immediate solution is to get her to Halsey, reasoning that as the one who made her, Halsey can fix her.
Don't make a girl a promise you can't keep.
As they move out of the wreckage, Cortana picks up the signal for the ship UNSC Infinity, responding to the distress beacon she dropped on Forward Unto Dawn, which is now sitting in a smoky ruin on the planet's surface. With the gravity well still active, Infinity coming to save them would be pretty bad, so Green Man hurries to a cartographer of the planet in order to narrow down Infinity's signal. They learn the planet is a Forerunner world called Requiem, and realize the signal is coming from inside the planet because it's hollow, because of course it is. They mosey on to the portal network only to be confronted with Beetlebots who are none too happy to see them. Yeeting their way to the core, they can't see Infinity anywhere, but because the satellite floating in the center is amplifying the ship's signal, they figure they might be able to use it to respond, essentially stumbling around in the dark on an ancient Forerunner world no one knows a goddamn thing about and just hoping for the best. Fighting through an atrocious amount of bull to shut off the shielding around the satellite, Green Man eventually reaches the console and tries to talk to Infinity via Ominous Orb, but he forgot to put on his wizard robe beforehand, so like a summoning circle done improperly, he releases a demon. Sorry, Didact. He releases the Didact, a f***ing Forerunner who is not remotely interested in being wise or helpful, but more interested in carrying on a campaign of retribution far in excess of what was ever deserved. See, the terminals in this game tell us the story of Didact and Librarian, a husband and wife living through a war with ancient spacefaring humans and then their war with the Flood. The humans invaded Forerunner space with merciless brutality, slaughtering millions because they were trying to get ahead of the Flood, trying to create a firebreak of scoured planets so the infection couldn't spread, but fighting the Flood and the Forerunners at the same time proved too much and broke them. As retaliation for their actions, the Forerunners used genetic engineering to regress humanity from a spacefaring civilization that could rival theirs to a tribal one. The Didact called this just, in his words.
They are closer now to the animals they behaved as.
So, the Didact is kind of a hard-ass, and upon being released from prison immediately sets off to finish what he started. The core begins to break with his departure, and Green Man makes a frantic escape, reducing many a grunt to roadkill on his way out. He escapes through a portal, and after avoiding the fate of Wile E. Coyote, witnesses Infinity fall out of the sky. Crossing the 77 kilometers to Infinity's crash site, Green Man finds the Didact harassing it with Covenant and scans that make this noise for some reason. Fighting his way through the jungle, Green Man regroups with people from the UNSC Infinity, Commander Lasky introduces himself, and Jennifer Hale comments on Green Man's height.
I thought you'd be taller.
With so many wounded, Lasky asks Green Man to clear a landing zone for them, which he does so with his usual stoicism. While Cortana is unlocking a door they needed open, she uncharacteristically yells at Green Man for asking about her progress and apologizes afterwards. Green Man reassures her it's okay, but they both know it isn't. Cortana is just being realistic about it. Finally getting back to Infinity, Green Man helps secure the ship and get it off the ground. We learn that during the last 4 years, humanity has been investigating the Halos and looking for ways to decommission them that aren't as explosive as the first game. Captain Del Rio is more concerned with getting his people out alive than pursuing the Didact after their guns drove him off, which is a totally reasonable position to hold if you aren't an unreasonable asshole about it. Green Man and friends proceed to clear the way for Infinity by taking out particle cannons, and when Green Man asks what Recon learned about the terrain, Del Rio condescendingly tells him it's a blow-through op and doing Recon would only slow them down. On the mission, Cortana has another glitch, and when Green Man reassures her, she makes a point of explaining to him what rampancy entails.
Chief, do you even understand what rampancy is? Really? We don't just shut down. Our cognitive processes begin dividing exponentially according to our total knowledge base. We literally think ourselves to death.
Which is fine. It's fine. She's fine. Sidetracking into a facility, Green Man plugs Cortana into the system only for something to snatch her. Giving chase leads him to a beam of light and he's confronted with a memory of the Librarian, the Didact's far more compassionate and understanding counterpart. She explains to Green Man that Didact wants something called the Composer, the tool he used to create the Beetlebots, or the Promethean Knights. They were made from the humans already punished with generations of retaliatory gene editing, tearing apart their biological forms and turning them into synthetic soldiers. The Didact detects their conversation, and the Librarian explains she can make Green Man immune to the Composer. He asks if he can defeat the Didact without her space magic messing with his biology, and when she answers no, he accepts without hesitation. Putting on an extra layer of plot armor, Green Man finally retrieves Cortana and moves on to the gravity well, keeping them trapped on Requiem, destroying it. With the skies finally clear, Infinity is free to make its escape from Requiem. Green Man and Cortana try to convince Captain Del Rio that the Didact needs to be stopped as soon as possible, considering he intends to turn all of humanity into his own personal Funko Pop collection. Del Rio continues to be inexplicably contemptuous towards Green Man and Cortana, downplaying what they thought they saw, dismissing Green Man as an aging Spartan just hallucinating bullshit, and Cortana as a malfunctioning AI when, up to this point, he hasn't seen Cortana have an episode because when he does...
I will not allow you to leave this planet!
Cortana.
I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to do that.
Commander Lasky. Pursuant to Article 55 of UNSC Regulation 12-14572, I'm ordering you to remove that AI's data chip and retire it for final dispensation.
He immediately wants her decommissioned, which, again, none of this is necessarily unreasonable from his perspective, but Del Rio is really slamming face first into the problem of the way you deliver your argument mattering a hell of a lot more than you actually being correct. His condescending mannerisms and contempt for those around him undercuts his points. Being logical is not enough, you need to deliver your point in a way people are receptive to, or you risk going unheard.
This should be baseline for a man in his position, and yet...
We cut to a monologue of Cortana wishing she could feel sunlight before Lasky comes down to the hangar to blatantly defy Del Rio's orders and hand Green Man a fully prepared pelican to get the job done. And can I just say, the face work in this game was really good. Expressions, face journeys, all fantastic. Characters were really emotive here in a way that didn't feel exaggerated or stiff. Cortana tries to lighten the mood by telling Chief to take a girl for a ride, and they set off to ruin Didact's day. Fighting through another long and immense amount of bullshit, they almost manage to trap Didact only for Cortana to have another episode and lose control of the spire she was about to imprison him with. Green Man follows his first impulse and yeets himself off the spire to hitch a ride on one of the Covenant ships following Didact off-world, and it's at this point that I have to wonder how fast space travel is in this setting because, like, how long was Green Man just hanging out on that ship's hull like a tick? Anyway, they arrive at the Halo facility where the Composer is located, crashing the ship after Cortana can't stop arguing with herself long enough to pull up. It's fine. She feels fine. It's fine. Making his way to Dr. Tilson, the researcher in charge of studying the Composer, Green Man ruins her entire week by concluding that because it can't be physically moved by their means, they need to destroy it, leading to another moment of fantastically done animation as this poor woman processes having to lose such important work.
Oh, wait. We have years of work invested here.
Inventory lists 7 excavation-grade Havoc mines. Just one of those would turn this base into a piñata.
I'm sorry, Doctor. Keep routing your people to the evac centers. Once we take care of the composer, you won't have much time.
I'll make sure the nukes are primed so you can detonate them remotely.
Which is a real shame, because despite Green Man's efforts and Cortana's continued resisting of Rampancy's effects on her psyche, it turns out that while we can't move the composer, Didact sure can, and he immediately uses it to compose everyone save Green Man himself, which I couldn't get raw footage of because the section where you defend the composer kept bugging out on me and I was just stuck forever in an empty room. I guess the story ends here. Needless to say, this is not great. Cortana, in a state of shock and trauma, comments that they'll pair Green Man with another AI, and Green Man stoically reassures her that it isn't over yet. Resolving to keep going, Green Man takes a nuke and flies after Didact, leading to a Death Star trench run that I managed to get through perfectly in a single run. No failures at all, I promise. Infinity, now captained by Lasky, because it turns out the rest of the military cared a whole hell of a lot about Del Rio just leaving the f***ing Master Chief behind, blasts a hole in Didact's ship for Green Man to slide in. He takes the warhead and clips it onto the back of his belt, which I am not comfortable with, but okay, we'll just have a nuclear warhead on our hip, it's fine. He fights through Didact's forces while Cortana struggles to keep her rampancy in check all the while, and reaches the core where Didact has surrounded himself with a shield. Cortana proceeds to divide herself and flood the system with her rampancy, which does not look healthy in the slightest, but does bring down the shield. And then the console explodes with her chip still inside. Hearing whispers of Cortana's voice all the while, Green Man makes his way to Didact and is almost killed, only for all of Cortana's disparate selves to rugby tackle Didact long enough for Green Man to shove a grenade in his chest. Didact Disney deaths into the slipspace disruption below, and Master Chief, unflinching, determined, unstoppable super soldier, frantically crawls his way to the warhead and detonates it with a final scream, stopping the composer from destroying humanity. And yet, he doesn't die. He wakes up in a temporary digital space with Cortana, life-sized for once, and... God damn it. John asks how they get out, only for Cortana to explain that it's too late for her, and that the most she could manage was getting him to safety. John, so stoically confident and unflappable at every other point, struggles to accept that, his voice wavering as he insists he will not abandon her. Cortana simulates touching his chest, and John despondently comments that it was his job to take care of her, to which she responds that it was their job to take care of each other, which they did. John still can't accept that, but Cortana doesn't have much longer and pulls away, leading to this last exchange between them. The space around him begins to collapse, all the carefully constructed walls of a soldier some claim to be a broken sociopath falling apart in grief as Cortana's dying act saves him from certain death. The story closes after Master Chief is rescued from floating in space and is brought aboard Infinity. Lasky attempts to talk with him while he's alone about what just happened, and it's clear that while, yes, he does struggle to socialize, he still cared deeply about Cortana, and the experience has obviously affected him. Lasky leaves him with the comment that soldiers like them aren't just machines, they're people, and Chief remembers Cortana telling him to figure out which one of them was really the machine. The very last scene is narrated by Didact, talking about how he would save the Forerunners from a fate where they have to recede from the galaxy, over footage of a rescue team arriving in the empty city he managed to compose before Chief stopped him. We're shown Chief taking off his armor, and if you finish the game on Legendary, you get a brief look at his eyes, which I did not, because I suck at this game. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed getting to actually play the Halo games, and practicing videos like this on a story I had no real investment in and could just enjoy as a first-timer was a fun experience. Unfortunately, playing Halo 5 is kind of out of the question unless I'm willing to do some f***ery, and if the folks at 343 don't think it was worth the time, then okay.